In this video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 electoral map if the polls underestimate Trump again, just like they did in 2020. I mean, look at a state like Wisconsin, for example. The polls said Biden was going to win by 8.4%. In the end, he won the state by 0.63%. And so today we're going to take a look at the 2024 polling and adjust for the 2020 error to show where Kamala Harris and Trump stand if the polls once again underestimate support for the former president. We're going to begin on the West Coast and move our way east, starting off in Washington, where polls overestimated Joe Biden by 3.8% in the last election. Today, Kamala Harris leads by 11.3%. Adjusting for the 2020 error, she'll be on track to winning the state by just 7.12 percentage points. For Oregon, it is barely going to be a likely blue state. However, things get even worse in Oregon, where the vice president is ahead by just 5 points in the only poll conducted between her and Trump. In 2020, polling overestimated Joe Biden by 5.2%. This means that if the polls are just as wrong this time again, Trump would actually win Oregon by a 0.2% margin. So it's going to be a tilt-red state. In California, Kamala Harris's home state, the polls were spot on 4 years ago. They were 100% correct. They accurately predicted Joe Biden's 29% victory. So we're just going to take Kamala Harris's margin right now, 24.5%. The Golden State will be the only solid blue state bordering the Pacific. Moving on to the first competitive state on the map, we have Nevada, a state that hasn't gone red since 2004. Kamala Harris currently leads by 0.6%, but that's not going to be enough. Donald Trump was underestimated by nearly 3 points in the last election, and if we adjust for the error, he'll be on track to win Nevada this time around by a 2.3% margin. The Silver State is barely going to be lean red, but considering that this is a state that Republicans haven't won since 2004, a state that Trump lost in both of the last two elections by 2.4%, this would be a pretty impressive victory. Nevada is a state that is becoming more and more favorable for Republicans. It recently elected a Republican governor in 2022, and we're probably going to see a lot more GOP victories here in the coming years. Trump is doing even better in Arizona, where he already leads in the polling average by 1.6%. Only 1 out of the 8 most recent polls shows Harris in the lead, and it was one conducted by Fox News. Now, polling in 2020 overestimated Joe Biden by 2.3%, so adjusting for that error, Trump will be on track to win the state by 3.9% this time around. Arizona very narrowly went to Joe Biden in 2020, but we're going to see Trump win the state for a second time by a similar margin to his margin in 2016. Arizona is going to be a much more comfortable lean Trump state. In neighboring Colorado, we recently got our very first poll from the state. Kamala Harris leads by 15 points, and Colorado is one of the few states on the map where Joe Biden was actually underestimated in the last election. He was underestimated by just 1%. Joe Biden was supposed to win Colorado by 12.5%, and in the end, he won it by 13.5 percentage points. Today, with Kamala Harris leading by 15 points in the only poll we have, this is not a good poll. Morning Consult is a left-leaning pollster, and it was a pretty small sample too, but based on the data that we have, Colorado is going to be solid blue. While down in New Mexico, Republicans were overestimated by 0.1%. This is not going to do too much to the polling average as we only have one poll. It shows Harris leading by 10%. She'll be on track to win by 10.1% as a result of the adjustment, and so New Mexico is going to be likely blue. Although in the end, I totally expect both of these states to be significantly more competitive. Down in Texas, we have 40 crucial electoral votes for Donald Trump, and basically every single Republican nominee without Texas, it gets a lot harder for the GOP. In 2020, it seemed like Democrats might have had a chance at winning the state. In fact, polling said that Joe Biden was only going to lose the Lone Star State by 1.1%. This would have been the most competitive election in Texas, going all the way back to basically the last time that they lost the state, which was 1976. Every Republican has been able to win by 2 points or more over the last nearly 50 years, and so today, Donald Trump leads by 7.3%. He was underestimated by 4.5% in the last election, and this will bring his adjusted margin up to 11.8%. Donald Trump is the clear favorite in Texas. It is not going to be close. The state will be likely in favor of the GOP. Many of the states here in the middle of the country, Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd District, which currently is going to be tilt blue along with Kansas and Oklahoma. Most of the states here in the middle of the country are all very easily going to go in favor of Donald Trump. We also have Alaska, which is going to be solid red, while Hawaii will be safe for Kamala Harris. Moving up to the Midwest, this is going to be a critical region, and this is the region where the polls get it wrong the most. This is why Hillary Clinton only went to Wisconsin once in the last 6 months of the 2016 campaign. Nobody thought that the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which had gone blue reliably for 3 decades before Clinton's election, were going to be even competitive. But in the end, Trump came out, surprised everyone, and won all 3 of these states. And these states are the ones that won him the election. In 2024, Donald Trump has to win just 1 out of these 3, and he basically locks Kamala Harris out. So, we're going to begin up in Minnesota, where the polling overestimated Democrats by 2.1% in the last election. Kamala Harris today leads by 5.5 in the polling averages, despite her running with the state's literal governor, Tim Walz, who is a relatively popular governor. So, with the just-in margin, she's only on track to winning the state by 3.4. Minnesota is barely going to be lean blue. In Iowa, the polls really underestimated Trump by a significant amount in 2020 by around 7 to 8 points. We don't have any 2024 polls from Iowa, though, but considering just how much Trump was underestimated in the last election, we are going to place it in the solid red column. Meanwhile, Illinois is going to be likely blue and Indiana solid red. If you watch the recent debate, then you'll know that the bias from the moderators is yet another example of the media environment contributing to division and making it hard for people to think for themselves. During election time, we can see here that there are over 600 articles on a recent story asking who won the Harris-Trump presidential debate. If we look at the coverage details and bias distribution, we can see which news sources cover the story, along with the breakdown of the political leaning of the outlets reporting. 41% of them lean left, while 22% lean right. If we want to compare headlines, we can see an outlet on the left reporting, Harris won the debate, and it wasn't even close, while this headline from an outlet that leans right calls out the biased moderators from ABC. With an intense election upon us, I highly recommend Ground News. Moving up to Wisconsin, which criminally overestimated Joe Biden in the last election by around 8 whole percentage points. Today, Kamala Harris leads by 1.8% in the state. She is boosted by the fact that Wisconsin does neighbor Minnesota, the home state of her running mate. However, if you compare Harris to where Clinton was in 2016, Clinton right now was leading by 4 points in September 8 years ago, and she ended up losing the state. In 2020, Joe Biden was leading by 6.5% and barely came out with the victory, just 1/10 of what the margin said in the last election at this point in September. So, Kamala Harris today, her 1.8% lead is most certainly not enough for her to actually win the state. If we adjust for the 2020 error, Donald Trump is on track to win Wisconsin by a whopping 6 percentage points. It's not even going to be close. While in Michigan, Democrats were overestimated by 5.1%, and polling today shows Harris on track to win by 1.2%. Again, comparing this to where Clinton was in 2016 and Biden in 2020, this 1.2% margin simply isn't going to cut it. Donald Trump is going to win by 3.9% if we adjust for the error. Another very comfortable state going in favor of Donald Trump, falling in the lean red category. Polling in Ohio was basically just as inaccurate as it was in Wisconsin. Joe Biden was overestimated by 7.2%. Ohio was supposed to be a 1-point race according to the polls, but in the end, Trump won the Buckeye state by 8 times that margin. Considering that he leads in the polling today by 9% adjusting for the error in the last election, he'll be on track to win by 16.2%. Ohio is going to be solid red, just like Iowa. In Pennsylvania, the polling right now actually shows a tie. Comparing this to where Clinton was in 2016, she led by 6.2% in September, and Joe Biden was ahead by 4.3%. Again, Clinton lost Pennsylvania, and Joe Biden barely won. So, with the polls having overestimated Biden by 3.5% in 2020, Donald Trump today is on track to flip the Keystone State and win it by a 3.5% margin. In the Northeast, most of these states are going to be solid or likely for the vice president. Vermont, Massachusetts, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine are all solid blue, while Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, and Delaware are going to be slightly more competitive. The 2nd District of Maine is going to be likely red. Beginning with the Empire State of New York, this is the first state we're going to take a closer look at in the northeastern United States. This is a state that Joe Biden was supposed to win by 30 points. He eventually won it by 23. Considering that Kamala Harris only leads by 14 points according to the only poll that we have so far, her margin will go down to 7.7% if we adjust for the last election's error. The Empire State will be likely blue and just barely over that 7-point threshold. In New Hampshire, Democrats were overestimated by 3.7%. Kamala Harris currently leads by 5, so with the adjusted margin, she'll win by just 1.3%. New Hampshire is very competitive. In 2016, we saw Donald Trump get within half a percentage point of winning the Granite State against Hillary Clinton. So once again, New Hampshire is going to be a tilt blue state. Finally, up in Maine, the 2 votes that come from the at-large results. In 2020, Joe Biden was overestimated by 3.9%. He was supposed to win by 14 points. He eventually won by 9. The latest polling in Maine has Harris up by 13. Now, this is some pretty bad polling. This University of New Hampshire poll shows Harris up by 17. There are so many things wrong with this, but we're just going to roll with it for the purposes of this video. With the adjusted margin, she's going to win by 9.1%. She would still do better than Joe Biden in the last election, which is almost impossible considering Joe Biden won Maine by 3 times the margin that Clinton won it by in 2016. Clinton won it by 2.9. Joe Biden won it by 9.1. So, Hillary Clinton barely won it. Joe Biden did better. Kamala Harris is probably going to win Maine by somewhere in the middle. Definitely not by 9. Now, to finish off the map, in the Southeast, most of these states are going to be solid red. Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and South Carolina are all easily going to go to Donald Trump. While up in Virginia, Kamala Harris leads by 5.3%, but Joe Biden was overestimated by 1.7%. So this means that her lead will cut down to just 3.6%. Virginia is definitely another key state for us to keep an eye on. It can definitely get very, very competitive in the next 8 weeks. In North Carolina, Donald Trump was underestimated by 3.3%. According to the polls from the last election, he was supposed to lose the Tar Heel state, but in the end, he won it for a 2nd time. Today, he is on track to win it for a 3rd time. He leads by 0.1% in the polling average, and with the adjusted margin, he's on track to win by 3.4%. Another comfortable lean red state going in favor of the former president. In neighboring Georgia, this is one of the few states where the polling was actually relatively accurate in terms of all of the swing states. Joe Biden was only overestimated by 1%. He was supposed to win by 1.2%. He eventually won the state by 0.2%. Today, with Donald Trump leading by 1.3%, the adjusted margin will bring him up to a plus 1.3%. So, the Peach State is going to be the only tilt red state on this map besides Oregon, which, in all honesty, of course, Kamala Harris is still the favorite there. But just for the purposes of this map, and proving the point that Donald Trump is severely underestimated every single time, it is also going to be the other tilt red state for now. In Florida, this is another state that Biden was supposed to win based on the polling, just like North Carolina, but he ended up coming up short. In fact, he did worse than Clinton from 2016. She only lost Florida by 1%. Joe Biden lost it by nearly 4%. So, Florida overestimated him by 6 points last time. And considering that Trump today leads by 6% in the state, with the adjusted margin, he'll carry it for a 3rd time by 12 percentage points. So, if the polling is as criminally incorrect as it was 4 years ago, Donald Trump is on track to win 320 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 218.